It is the Everton Byline, episode 30 here on the Blue Room. I'm Matt Jones. Joining me as ever is Paddy Boylan. Paddy, bit pressed for time today. Somebody even said hello before we started recording. Hello, how are you doing? You all right?
Yeah, good, thanks. I don't know about you, but I'm still playing over Saturday's game in my head. Trying to like toe the line between being kind of indignant as somebody who wanted Everton to succeed on Saturday, kind of the outcome at the end of the match, with then the journalistic side of this and being balanced and fair and factoring in guidance from kind of all quarters. And then that additional element as well, Matt, where you're also looking at the 2-0 lead and how that becomes a 2-2 and very nearly a 3-2 at various points to Man United. A really bizarre, kind of chaotic game. Came away with my head kind of slightly scrambled, but I was dejected up to a point until I realised that Everton are 14 points clear of relegation. And had this game happened even a month ago, it would have felt so much worse than it does right now. That's just my takeaway. Maybe that's blue sky thinking or whatever. Glass half full.
Yeah, like we'll get into it, won't we? But every now and then I just see something that just piques my anger again about it all. But yeah, we'll get into all that. Just a reminder, as ever, we are sponsored by the Bride with the sun coming out. It's absolutely boiling hot in the Gladys Street on Saturday. So yeah, get down to that courtyard. The tables outside. Great place to have a bevy in the sunshine. If you're watching us on YouTube, do hit like, do hit subscribe, leave us a comment. Let us know, is this a big conspiracy against Everton or are the referees just crap? Or is it somewhere in the middle? Let us know your thoughts on all that sort of stuff.
Definitely crap.
Yeah, they might be. Yeah, they definitely are. Yeah, maybe don't leave us comment on that because it goes without saying. But there's what you think about any of the topics we discussed today, and if you're listening on iTunes or on Spotify, do leave us a 5-star review, leave us a comment if you can on Spotify as well. Seeing a lot more people start to do that. So thank you for getting involved and interacting with the show. Just before we start, Paddy, you wanted to mention an event you were at yesterday with some North American toffees. You said you had a lovely time and met some great people.
Yeah, so Sunday afternoon I was at the Bramley-Moore Hotel, as it's now known, facing the new Everton Stadium, where a group of, I think it was around 90 North American toffees came over and I did a Q&A with them. They'd been at the game on Saturday as well. I mean, amazing that in Goodison's final season, you've got 90 people from across America and Canada in some cases attending that match on Saturday. And I was speaking to people from Minnesota, Kentucky, San Diego, New York, Washington, all these different places, Atlanta. Had some great conversations, and I just wanted to give a shout out to the organisers. So you've got Tony Sampson from Everton Chicago, Bridget, who most people will know from the Atlanta group. Those two in particular, although there are others, for their kind of the role they're doing and kind of flying the flag over in the US for Everton. I thought it was a really well, like if you look at the itinerary for the weekend, really well put together and a great experience for kind of those North American toffees and in Goodison's final season. And on a personal level, it was nice to speak to a lot of them, to do the Q&A and to discuss Everton with them in the pub afterwards. So yeah, just wanted to give a quick shout out to that, basically, Matt.
Absolutely, yeah. I saw lots of stuff over the weekend where they seem to be in the thick of it all. So it seemed like they had a great weekend. And listen, if Everton do happen to play in Chicago or anywhere in the States in the summer, and he wants to pull up me and Paddy for a few nights, tell us all where the best drinking hotspots are over in the States. Listen, in the name of journalistic responsibility, Paddy, and making sure our product gets, as far as possible, we will happily accept any of those offers, won't we?
Well, I'm all ears, and I mean that literally as well, given the actual size of my ears. But like, particularly on those two key points, somewhere to stay and somewhere to drink, that would be a brilliant trip if it does come off. And it's not over the line yet. We're awaiting confirmation, whatever you want to call it. But that would be a great trip and a good one to do. So fingers crossed, Matt. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. Let's move on from looking wistfully ahead to the summer to looking angrily back. That's Saturday. Because you sort of said, you sort of mentioned there about how there's a whole different amounts of things that come into this. Everton playing well for an hour, Everton collapsing a little bit, which is obviously a bit of a theme. And I know Les was talking about that with Rob on Kickabout, if anyone wants to sort of have a bit of a deeper delve into that. But we're going to focus on the ending and how it all came about and what's come out since, and just try and move this on a little bit. And what I'm going to do, Paddy, right? And you're going to basically interrupt me now when what I'm saying, there's been a mistake made. So I'm going to try and go through what happened.
What you're saying?
No. What literally is being officially said happened.
Yeah, of course.
In the final stages, and how the referees, after awarding the penalty, the referees obviously award the penalty, and how the VAR and the referee together came to the decision to not or to overturn that penalty on Saturday. Because I think it's important to sort of go through the details as they're saying it before we go on to call them crap or whatever. So this is my understanding of it. And again, if this is wrong at any point, just jump in. You can make a little sound effect if you want. I don't know what you want to do. Okay. So Ashley Young has the shot. No, that's wrong already. Trezeguet has the shot.
You're wrong. I'll tell him there you're wrong.
If Trezeguet has the shot, which Onana parries back into play, Ashley Young is grabbed first by De Ligt and then a bit by Maguire.
Correct.
Ashley Young goes down. The referee madly awards the penalty. Then VAR make it known to Madley that they think he needs to come and check this, before which he will have made them aware that he is given a penalty against Manchester United for a foul on Young by Maguire, not by De Ligt.
Correct.
Is that right so far?
Yeah, you get 100%
on
that particular test.
Right. So then, when he's told them that, VAR's in turn looked at that incident, which is Maguire on Young, and said, we're not sure that is a foul. Come over to the screen and have a look at it. He has gone over to the screen subsequently to have a look at it, and they have shown him what they consider to be the best angles of that particular incident, which is, again, nothing to do with De Ligt. This is Maguire on Ashley Young. He's obviously had a look at that. And as we all know, in this situation, when the referees go over to the monitor, he's looked at it. He's seen those angles of that particular, again, put to stress, Maguire on Young. And then he's thought, that's not a foul. And he's decided to overturn the penalty there. Right?
Yep.
But go on, mate, go on.
The only thing to add, and you might have been saying this as I interrupted, in fairness, Matt, was that the guidance we got from the Premier League's match centre on Saturday, in fairness, was that, according to them, the bit with De Ligt was also checked, and that they had access, the referee Madeley had access to a high shot from behind the goal, which showed both incidents in full. Again, as I wrote in my piece, it's up to them whether you want to take them at their word on face value. I actually think it doesn't really matter, because there's at least one foul in there, probably two. And if we go right the way back to the original point about the VAR intervention, they're only meant to intervene when there is a clear and obvious error. And I think if you look at the totality of the incident, the penalty incident, there's not a clear and obvious error in Everton being awarded a penalty. The outcome is what it should have been. And then it goes wrong from there. So like my big problem with VAR, Matt, is that it effectively gives more incompetent people an opportunity to feed in. And I would almost rather have one fool doing it than 3 or 4. That's where I am with it.
So at what point? I think I'm right. So is it the point where they decide that so effectively, because again, this might sound confusing, but I just want to try and make sure I've definitely got this right, and people who listen know that this is the right process, which is obviously a word very infamous when it comes to VAR, given what happened last year with Diaz and stuff. So they decide ultimately that the referee's given a penalty for a foul on Maguire, which then in turn means that the foul in inverted commas, which the referee is not given on the field by De Ligt on Young, is not judged against that threshold, which would be
Correct.
in the sense that the referee is not going to intervene to overturn it because it's not been given as a foul, if that makes sense. But at what point in the process? I read Dale Johnson's piece on ESPN today. It gives a really good breakdown of this, but I'm not sure he covered this bit. At what point would they say the foul by De Ligt on Young is not worthy of being overturned, or it's not it doesn't meet the threshold for another look? Does that come through? Would that come through at any point, or do they just not know that until the audio is released on mic'd up in a few weeks?
We don't know. Is the honest answer until we get that full breakdown, that full, I would say, audio and video from that particular incident. And I'll be really intrigued to see how the process works, as I'm sure many other Evertonians will be as well. The point I'd like to make about it is that they're assessing the two moments, so the Maguire challenge and the De Ligt challenge, on a different set of criteria. With Maguire, they've given a foul, so therefore there needs to be clear and obvious evidence to overturn. They have deemed that there is clear and obvious evidence to overturn, and it was an error. So that's why, in effect, the penalty was rescinded. But then, because they haven't given the De Ligt foul, there's a high bar that again works against Everton. And it has to be kind of provable, again, a clear and obvious error that the penalty wasn't awarded. I suppose that's where my point of view would diverge from that of the officiating team and the VAR team at Stockley Park, because I think when somebody says that this wasn't a foul by De Ligt, that is a clear and obvious error. I think it is. I actually, maybe this is blue-tinted specs, Matt, I actually think it's a foul by Maguire as well. I think anywhere else on the pitch, and not that is a foul, because if you look at what he does, he grabs him, attempts to grab him twice, but kind of gets him by the waist. And for me, they are both fouls. And Ashley Young is getting to that ball for a pretty clear-cut chance on goal with Onana on the floor. So, I mean, that was the overriding topic. That was the topic that dominated everything. Even Moyes' press conference afterwards, the questions that we're asking him. But
he was remarkably calm about the whole thing.
He was, but I mean, he's in a position to be sanguine when they are 14 points clear. To go back to my original point, I mean, a week or 3 weeks or more ago, and he, like everybody else, probably would still be seething now at that, because it really, really would have mattered. And I'm not saying it's not important, because it still is, and I understand why people are upset about this. But there's not the same sense of jeopardy right now. We're not going into these games thinking Everton have to win this game, and if they don't, it's the end of the world. They could get relegated. And that's why it feels, in my opinion at least, it feels a little bit different. I mean, we went down to the mix zone afterwards, as I'm sure you wanted to talk about. We spoke to Jake O'Brien in the tunnel. He was asked about the mood in the dressing room. He said they were all gutted because they'd squandered a 2-goal lead, and gutted because of what happened with the penalty at the end. As Moyes put it, this was a draw that felt more like a defeat, whereas the Liverpool draw, obviously because of the circumstances, the late goal for Tarkowski, was a draw that was at the other end of the spectrum, felt like a win. And I really want to talk about that final 20, 25, 30 minutes. As you've referenced there, as Les has mentioned on his show, I think that's the pertinent thing for Everton now. We can rant and rave all we want about the injustice at the end, because it probably was an injustice. But what are the lessons? What are the kind of the palpable outcomes Everton can take from this? I think one of them is, how do they stop this from happening? Because we saw it against Bournemouth earlier in the season. At times, this felt sort of like a rerun of that over a slightly more extended period. We actually saw it in the game against Tottenham, even though it didn't come back to bite. Everton were 3-0 up, and it finished 3-2, very nearly 3-3. and again on Saturday, 2-0 becomes 2-2. So I think we need to learn some lessons from what's going on. I think there are several lessons to learn.
I think that's definitely right. I also have more sympathy for Moyes than I did maybe for Dyche, and like that.
Yep.
People might have recency bias, and I was sort of amazed by how they managed to get through to the end of that Palace game and sort of be the team that was. They rode out a Palace storm, didn't they, in the second half? And then as the game grew on, you kind of felt like Everton could nick this, and Everton were the team that not dominating necessarily, but looked dangerous on counter attacks and were applying a bit of pressure. And I think the physical levels they showed to do that was pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it just felt like it. Like on about the hour mark, it just felt like it all kind of hit them collectively, and
Agreed.
And like you could maybe look at the situation on the subs bench and say, he could have brought Irabunam on for one of the midfielders or Doucoure, but up front, is he going to bring on Sheriff when he's not brought him on in any other game this season? No.
Or Michael Keane.
Or Michael. I mean, you don't bring Keane on for. He's not a half an hour centre forward. He's the last 5 minutes lash it forward, centre forward. And I think the other thing he'd obviously already made the change, Andy, with Lindstrom going off with an illness as well, which I think he would have been a little bit wary of. So I do get it, and I think there's definitely things that lads on the pitch who are even tired can do better in that sense. And obviously there's a mental fragility there as well. But then I kind of hope the Tottenham game, just like sort of getting through that, would have potentially helped see off this thing. But yeah, I think it is a running issue, although I do think there's shades of grey in there. Like I wouldn't say that, say for example, the Spurs game was necessarily like the one at the weekend, or the Bournemouth collapse was necessarily like the Villa away one. Like the different sorts of aspects in there. But I don't know, I just think it sort of comes down to quality, doesn't it? And bodies, really. And we haven't got loads of quality, and we haven't got loads of bodies in the squad. And I think one of the most, I suppose we've sat here on these shows and on other podcasts. I sort of said what an amazing job Moyes has done with so few players in such a short space of time. So is this the flip side of that now, isn't it? When you see, United are dreadful. But you look at the players they brought on at the weekend. So, Garnacho is a good player to be able to bring off the bench. Can't even remember the other lads they brought on. But they brought a couple of players off the bench. Euro, how much is he costing the summer? £65 million. They're bringing on good players who've got energy. So yeah, I mean, it was frustrating, but I was still fuming about the VAR. I think it was important that O'Brien actually, and it was good that he sort of highlighted the overall perform to the referee, because he was absolutely shocking for the entire game.
Yeah,
I've not seen a ref kind of bullied like that, like a kid in the schoolyard a little bit by two senior players, as he was by Fernandes and Maguire throughout the course of that game. But the thing that annoyed me about it, Paddy, was like, I stood there in the Gladys Street for like 4 minutes, was it, for that goal in the first half, where they looked at every single little thing. And it's only when you actually got back out of the ground and saw what they were looking at, where you could see within about 30 seconds, like, this is fine. Like, there's no way that goal was going to get disallowed, but they took forever, and they went through the minutiae of every possible way that this goal couldn't have counted. And I think the penalty, when you break it down, look at the processes they've got to go through, by the book. I wouldn't say you can kind of get it, but I imagine it makes sense to those referees. But why didn't it just take a little bit longer? What was the rush at the very end of the game to sort of get this moving again? It just absolutely baffled me. And I think I'm also really annoyed. I think people have pointed the fingers at the VAR, and whether he's from Greater Manchester or not, I don't really care. But I sort of look at the referee in that situation and think, if I'd just seen a share pull, which he obviously has, he's obviously seen a share pull in real time to give that penalty. Everyone on the ground could see the share pull, bloody hell. If he's then gone over to the monitor and seen a view of the instance that doesn't seem to show a share pull, I'll just be sort of thinking, what's going on here? I've definitely just seen that with my own eyes. And I think, I would just love one of them. I think it's only happened a few times, hasn't it? But I'd love one of them once just to stand up for themselves and have a bit of conviction in the decision making and say.
Moyes said this.
What's that? Sorry, Moyes.
Moyes said this in the press conference. He said, it becomes a foregone conclusion. In most cases, he'd love to see a referee sticking up for their original decision. The problem we've got, Matt, is that the referee is effectively on the pitch. He's told he's wrong by the VAR and the VAR assistant. And I think from that point on, confirmation bias starts to set in because they're showing him a very specific set of images to back up their view. As we've already established earlier, some of those pictures helped aid their cause in what they're trying to push through on the referee. They've not helped Everton, and they've not actually completely shown the full picture. Like, some of the angles of the lip pull quite clearly were missing, but the referee sees a load of different angles, and has almost basically made up his mind, I think, by the time the final one from behind the goal is shown. And I think that
he's walking off, isn't he? He walks off dead quick, like before, like midway through one of the replays.
That's confirmation bias. So I mean, I took what Moyes said, and I think that's something that needs to change with VAR. I would love to see referees stick up for the original decision, saying, no, this is a penalty, and I stand by that. I think that's very tough for them to do at the moment with the protocols and the way they are. O'Brien did highlight not only the penalty, he said he thought there were poor decisions throughout the game. I think the game was refereed in a really bizarre way in the second half. I think it was like everything in the first half they let go, and everything after the break was so stop-start. But some of the things, and again, I'm not entirely sure this has a direct impact on the result, but like when Beto turns Maguire on the halfway line and is pulled down, how is that not a yellow card? There various other incidents like that in the game where I was pretty much speechless that these decisions weren't given.
The two tackles on Mikolenko were just remarkable. Like that, you know, I think Keith Hackett's come out today and said they could have both easily been red cards, and like it's sort of gone on the radar because of like the madness at the end. But yeah, I absolutely hate it. Like I would happily get rid of VAR tomorrow. Like, just look at when we've had the penalty at the weekend, we had Beto's first goal, we had Mateta's against Crystal Palace the other week, we had Tarkowski's equalised. Like that's 5 like big massive delays in the space of 3 games that we have to sort of sift through, and no one's got a clue what's going on. Like
it kills enjoyment. Like even with that Beto goal, 4 minutes have elapsed between him actually finding the back of the net and the goal being given. And I think by that point, everyone actually just gets a bit sick of VAR, and that becomes the overriding emotion rather than the jubilation.
I hate all like the gamesmanship that goes on like in between it as well. Like people who who don't go to the match would see this on the telly, but like when Beto's is being reviewed, like Anana's getting the ball and rushing back, so like, oh yeah, this is definitely disallowed. This is definitely going to be disallowed. So you stood there in the ground thinking like, oh god, he must know that it's going to be disallowed. Or you're looking across. I've never looked, Paddy, at the executive boxes or the press box at Goodison in my life as much as I have done over the last few weeks, trying to get a gauge on the people who come see it on the telly and what their reaction is to the decision. Like it's absolutely terrible for the match-going fan.
That's wrong. As I said to somebody else over the weekend, the experience is worst for the paying match-going fan. And I know people pay for the subscriptions, and they're costlier than they should be, if we're being honest as well. But for the match-day fan, the experience is so poor. I mean, we're different in the media because we've got monitors and we can see what's happening. But if you're in the Gladys Street, the only thing you see of that penalty incident is after the decision is given. And that almost provoked more fury, because then people were looking at it going like, well, hang on, what the hell's going on? Ashley Young's reaction was a picture. He kind of pulled his shirt over his face. He just couldn't understand it, in disbelief. David Moyes has thrown his arms up on the sideline and straight over to the fourth official. Kind of all that colour that you get in the game that obviously you can't see if you're watching on the TV. That's something that needs to change for me. I also just think, going back to the original point, I don't necessarily have a problem with the technology in isolation. I think it's the way it's being implemented. And I think we have managed to implement it in the Premier League worse than just about any other domestic league. I don't have a problem with VAR if it's done well, but it's not being done well. And that's where it becomes an issue for me. I mean, like 4 minutes to check the Beto goal for me is ridiculous. I also think that for the second United goal, it's quite clear that Branthwaite falls over, he takes a tumble, and he's appealing as Ugarte strikes into the net. And if that was checked, it was checked in the space of about 30 seconds and cleared. And like, how can that take 30 seconds and then the Beto goal takes 4 minutes? I mean, like, the priorities seemed very skewed for me. So, I mean, I share all the frustrations, and obviously O'Brien shared those frustrations as well. I do feel as though there were double standards in the second half from the officials. I do feel as though they, some of the decisions were hard to understand. It sort of felt to me as though like Fernandes and Maguire got really vocal. I mean, they certainly did immediately after the penalty was awarded, and that fuss that was caused kind of led to some of what we saw. It felt like they were almost influencing a bit more than they should have been. I mean, that's not a new complaint with somebody like Fernandes. It's probably not a new complaint with Maguire. And even without all of that, even without the controversy, you're still kind of scratching your head as to how Everton haven't won the game anyway. I mean, there were points in that game, end of the first half, start of the second, where Everton were running through at will, and I was thinking this is going to be 3 or 4-0 if they keep it up. The problem they had was that they dropped the intensity of it. Moyes had, as we've discussed, a threadbare squad and couldn't. Beto looked gassed to me. It looked like he needed to go off on about 65, 70. Do you trust Irabunum to replace Doucoure or Idrissa Gueye and be as disciplined when you're holding the lead? I probably don't. So there were some problems there. And then, if we're being honest, Man United didn't create chances. I mean, these were half chances at best. The Ugarte goal, the volley, and then the Fernandes free kick. But they were super clinical. So it was a little bit different to Bournemouth and a little bit different to Tottenham. But it was still galling nonetheless. It was still galling because Everton should have won that game. On the balance of chances, on the balance of everything else, they should have won that game comfortably. And then they should have had an opportunity at the end to right some of the wrongs of the second half and make it 3-2. Really interesting to see who would have taken the penalty, by the way, Matt, because...
Wow, I think Pickford wanted to take it, genuinely.
I think like, Alcaraz did. Alcaraz is closest to the penalty spot throughout. It's almost like he's marking his territory to take it. And he did take penalties for Flamenco at times.
They do that thing, don't they, where like one of them holds the ball and like shields the... So I don't know. But like I did, because Pickford was up like forward, and I think he was asking somebody something like, I mean, if he was ever going to take a penalty, that was the time to do it, when like we're not going down, last kick of the game sort of thing. But
who would you have given it to?
Probably Alcaraz, or I don't know about Beto. And like sometimes I don't think he can kick the ball properly, but then other times he finishes really well. I don't know. Yeah, probably Alcaraz.
I'd have probably gone Alcaraz.
But I just like the final. We've gone on for ages on this. We have to make the last 2 points quite quick. But the final thing I'll say about this as well, people who are calling Ashley Young a diver, just go back and watch Doucoure at the end of the first half when he's running into the box. And I think it's Doucoure who comes across and clips his heels, and he stumbles and he stays on his feet, and it's not given as a penalty because Lindstrom went over to Doucoure. Lindstrom went over to Doucoure and said, you should have gone down there. Like, he went over and remonstrated with him, and if he'd gone down, it would have been a penalty. Everton potentially would have been 3-0 up, and that's game over. Like, if you don't go down, if you don't go down, you're not going to get anything, are you? So, like, I could see why Young maybe tried to make a bit of a meal of it, but it isn't.
He did make a meal of it. It was theatrical. I still don't think that negates the fact that
not at all. Not at all.
You can still foul somebody and then somebody can go to ground theatrically. Not just the Doucoure one, but the James Garner instance, as I was saying. In fact, he was hacked twice, once in the box and once just outside. And I don't think Everton got either of those two decisions in the first half. So it kind of proves your point a bit. I think you kind of have to go down, or the officials just aren't looking at it.
Yeah, right. Let's rattle through a couple more talking points. Doucoure, as we mentioned there, came back into the side. I think like last week we were sort of saying that like Alcaraz should keep his place, goal and assist, but I mean, like the closer we got to the game, Paddy, the more I thought, well, yeah, Doucoure's gonna come back in. And I think for an hour anyway, and maybe something we'll come on to, but for an hour anyway, I think he showed exactly why managers love him, why Dice loved him, and certainly why Moyes has been a big fan of him early doors, because he was all the things you expect from Abdoulaye Doucoure.
I would not have brought him back into the team off the back
Oh,
of
no,
that.
would I? But as we got closer, I sort of thought Moyes would, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, Moyes' inclination there is to go with the tried and tested, I think. And hopefully that's not doing him a disservice, but he tends to make those kind of selections, and he obviously did on Saturday. He obviously felt Doucoure had credit in the bank. I think the really important context here is the tactical plan and how Doucoure fits into that. And for me, I actually thought until Everton got tired, until the intensity dropped on about 65, 70, the blueprint is as close to perfect as it can be, in essence. 2-0 up, maybe should have been a few more up. Clearly press United very high, higher than Everton have done a lot of times this season. Forced errors, got on the front foot. I mean, there's one point, I made a note of it on my laptop while the game was going on. There's one point where Jacob Bryan is pressing somebody on the edge of the Man United box, and that's Everton's right back, his 6'5" right back, who's doing that. But I thought Doucoure was excellent and fully justified his place. I'm not just talking about the goal there, but I just more how he fit into that tactical plan, how he pressed. I think he's the best in the Everton side at doing that and then dropping into shape. And I thought he was better in his all-round play in general as well. So for me, it worked. I mean, I've described him before, and I think you probably have, Matt, as Everton's comfort blanket in tough times. He's the one they always kind of go back to because he gives you 12k of running every game. He dropped in as a third central midfielder. He can join the attack. I thought he put in a great shift on Saturday, and obviously he started again to chip in with a few important goals. So I think you have to give credit to Moyes there. I mean, I wouldn't have made that change, but Moyes did, and I do think it paid off. I mean, I wrote in my match piece that Alcaraz and Irabunum were ready to come on at 2-1, and then those changes, I think, happened on 81, just after Ugarte had equalised. I mean, a bit unfortunate, but they came late in the day, those changes. Could have done with something else up front. I also think the Lindstrom sub killed a bit of Everton's momentum. And look, Doucoure was getting some success down that side, and I thought he had a really good game for United, actually, at left wing back. Maybe the idea of Ashley Young coming on and being effectively another right back, another right wing back was helpful. But what Lindstrom had done so successfully for me was pin them back. And he was an outball, extra pace, something for them to worry about. As soon as he comes off, I think it kind of can go from being really front foot and really aggressive in the play to not quite being able to do the same. And I do think it harmed them. I mean, Moyes said afterwards that he was sick, and he'd complained of feeling sick again at half time. So that's why he came off. But I think that was quite a big blow. And that's less about Lindstrom as a player and his impact, and more just the qualities he has in terms of fitting into Everton's blueprint there. So I think they lost a bit of momentum there, and I think they lost a bit of momentum afterwards. I just think they're really unlucky that the decisions go against them, and Manchester United capitalise in the way they do, because their 2 goals are worldies.
Yeah, like, and I think the Doucoure thing, it's like, I always remember like watching him at Watford and was just always struck by like how omnipresent he seemed on matches. Like, not necessarily like getting on the ball and dominating, but he was just always around the action. Like, obviously he's a big guy, so his presence is excellent, and I think you saw that with obviously the goal at the weekend. And I think like when he was probably at his best for us under Dice, he could do that for the full game. But I just feel like the injuries, like he's playing well. Like, I think he's played well since Moyes has come in and done pretty.
Yep.
You know, like you said, he's chipping in with decent goals and making good contributions. But it does feel like the injuries have kind of made them a 60, 65-minute player now. And I feel like we need to be ready afford that. Like there should be a plan on an hour. It's like when Doucoure's influence stops on the game or starts to wane on the game, then what are we going to do? Is it going to be Irabunum and you go back into midfield three? Is it going to be Alcaraz and you keep that shape with the one midfielder push forward? Like I feel like that's got to be a contingency plan going forward, because like it did feel there was a noticeable drop off like after the hour mark on Saturday, certainly with him and certainly with Beto as well. Obviously with Beto, there's just nothing we can do in that sense unless you go to a rogue option or a child from the academy up front. But with Doucoure, there are options there. You know, like I said, you can do a whole different manner of things in that position or change the shape. So it just feels like Moyes needs to have a bit more of a plan for when that gas tank is empty a little bit earlier than it was in the past.
Yeah, no, you're spot on. And I think we are seeing the paucity of the options in the squad, because you imagine Iliman and Dwight McNeil, one of Armando Broja and Dominic Calvert-Lewin on the bench. Maybe the manager has more faith in some of those options, and Calvert-Lewin comes on and holds the ball a bit, or Broja runs in behind and gets a third goal, and things are very different. I mean, I thought United were there for the taking. I thought they were really, really dreadful, and maybe that's why this feels or felt a little bit worse. The point I keep coming back to, Matt, is that, look, a month ago this would have really, really stung, even more so than now, even. And I think that's one kind of bit of solace for me.
Can you imagine the anger that would be being flung around here? It's just
yeah.
Do you know what? We'll leave it there on the usual topics this week, because as I said, we are unfortunately a little bit more pressed for time this week. So we'll go to the squad numbers, Paddy. Have you had the look at number 30?
I have, but my memory is like a sieve, so I'm now going to have to go back on it to remember. The one I can remember straight away, somebody I don't think played for Everton, was Paul Tate, who is now actually the club's under-21 manager.
So he was given the share but didn't actually play for us?
Yeah, but that's quite standard. If you look at any old programs, you'll see right at the bottom of the squad list there'll be individuals in there that got shirt numbers that just didn't play, and they were just listed there in case they were needed. Paul Tate was in there. Is there anyone you want to speak about?
There's some good ones. So Connor Cody was the last one to have it. It's his birthday on the day this goes out. So happy birthday, Connor! If you're listening, this is the byline. I'll rattle through some, and then we'll dabble into a couple of bit more detail. Donny van der Beek, Mohamed Besic, Cuco Martina, Richarlison in his first season, won number 30. Mason Holgate, Antoine Alcaraz, Francisco Jr., Skodran Mustafi, John Ruddy, he won it 3 times in 3 different spells. Nick Chadwick, Peter Clark, Phil Jevons, Jed Hennigan, and Paul Tate. I think of all them, very quickly, the one I would like to talk about was Besic, because Besic I thought was going to be really good for us, and he showed good signs early on after that weird back heel, which set Diego Costa up that time. But he just could never stay fit. I remember when we played City in the semi-final of the League Cup and we won 2-1 at Goodison, and I think Rom scored a couple of goals that night. Or no, 3 years ago, we scored and Lukaku scored the second half of the Glasgow Street end. But Besic was absolutely brilliant. He bossed a really good Manchester City midfield around. And I always felt like one of those players, like when he was getting fit and just started to be moving through the gears, injury struck, and he ended up being out for a few weeks again.
Yeah, I mean, remember the very first touch he had in competitive football for Everton, I think, is giving Diego Costa a goal. I mean, overly elaborate piece of play in the middle of the park. Yeah, I think he was one that, on the whole, I think supporters took to, because he was definitely committed and would throw tackles in. I think this collectively is the worst cohort of any of the cohorts we've had so far.
No, I'm not having that. Donny van der Beek, Richarlison.
Well, Richarlison aside, like Donny van der Beek was not a success for Everton. Richarlison obviously was, but only wore the shirt for 1 year, and I don't really associate him with the number 30 anyway. If you go through the rest of that list, I mean, Skodran Mustafi had a good career, but again, assessing him on Everton terms, very little in the way of contribution. The rest of them, Cuco Martina. I mean, what I always used to find remarkable about Sam Allardyce press conferences was that he would always refer to Martina as Coco.
Yeah.
It was quite difficult being sat in the front row of those press conferences at times, trying to keep a straight face as he was referring to Coco Martin. There's some others in there that I'm sure I've forgotten, but I mean, it's not a great cohort in general. Richarlison aside,
I loved number 30. I loved number 30 Richarlison that first season. He was brilliant.
And Alcaraz, the one who, I mean, that selection in Kiev, for example, just completely kills Everton.
So. That was an all-time bad Everton, like an iconically bad Everton performance. That wasn't it? That Alcaraz won in Kiev.
Yeah. So, I mean, that is it now infamous. And probably on the manager at the time as well, in fairness, given some of the other options available. Besic played right back in the United Cup loss, the semi-final.
He did,
he scores late on, because Everton are really struggling with injuries. I think Jagielka played actually with quite a serious injury and had to take an injection beforehand to even be involved. They had Besic at right back. I mean,
he recalled Matty Pennington, didn't he, before the game as well? I remember that. And everyone thought he was going to play right back, and then Besic ended up playing there. But yeah, I remember Jags was like, took up, I think, a load of painkillers, didn't he, to just sort of get through that game, and like he knew his season was going to be over after it. But
you know what? Even then, the performance was still. I mean,
he was great that day, Jags. Yeah, he was really good.
Everton played so well, and obviously missed a lot of chances. But I mean, that's a pretty familiar tale if you go back through Fiorentina and some of these various other near misses. So yeah, I'm going to neck out and say, Richarlison aside, number 30 cohort is the worst we've done so far.
Well, wait till next week. That's all I'm going to say. Because I'm a little glimpse at next week. It's not a classic list by any means. So, number 31. Number 31 should be interesting.
Oh, there's some good players, isn't there?
No, it's much. Next week is much worse. Much worse, I'm going to say. Right. We'll wrap it up there anyway. We are sponsored by the Bridewell, as ever. Thanks to them for their continued support. And do look out on their socials for the great nights they've got coming up over the next few weeks. If you watch us on YouTube, hit subscribe, hit like, do leave us a comment. It all helps in the algorithms, and the same goes with audio as well. If you listen to us on iTunes or on Spotify, please leave us a 5-star review. Do leave us a nice comment if you'd like to. And also if you're watching on YouTube, I apologise there for my wife, daughter, and dog bursting into the shop.
Let's keep it straight.
BBC, it was very much like that BBC News clip, wasn't it, for the pandemic? This is the kind of professional standards we have here on the Byline. But listen, you don't know this, Paddy. When you've got kids, it's absolute chaos in the house. So thanks very much to them for adding their contributions to the show as well. We'll be back next week to reflect on the game against Brentford, which is on Wednesday, of course. And look ahead to an Everton break. So we might do some questions and answers after that game as well. But cheers for your support as ever. Up the toffees. We'll speak to you again very soon.